Hi, Tiana. Thank you so much for joining me today. Can you tell us a little, or tell me a little bit more about your role at ACE?
Sure. I am Tiana Freiri-Foley, and I am currently the lead educational specialist at ACE. I have both my special education mild to moderate certificate as well as my multiple subject certificate in credentialing.
Thank you. I sent you the link for my YouTube videos and my lesson plan with the other worksheets for my week 2 lesson plan. Do you have any, can we go through and take a look at that together and go through the feedback on that?
Of course. Where would you like to start?
Well, I am supposed to go back and do reflections for my lesson plan. So the very first question it says is based on your analysis of the student's learning evidence, if you have had none when discussed, when will that be, etc. Establish what has been learned and by whom. So I think the first step is we want to establish the learners, and if you thought that they also got the lesson down and learned the objectives as well. And then what have you learned out there from their characteristics?
I think from observing your videos, it was very clear that your learners were working hard on their fluency, and they were able to be successful in growing their fluency. I was really proud of how you used precise praise, and you told them exactly where they were doing great. And I think one of them, he was doing great on his accents when he was reading his book. However, you went back and helped him with some pronunciation of some words that he needed some help with sounding out. And so I thought that was really great how you used that precise praise to help grow. And I think that's what led to the students being successful.
Do you feel like there was improvements for success there that I should think about reflecting on, or do you think that they have mastered what the lesson intended?
I definitely feel that the students mastered their reading fluency, and I think they could possibly move on to harder books, or even seeing your exit ticket, looking at seeing if instead of giving them a reading that they've read before, maybe giving them a new reading for their exit ticket to see how their fluency is with a reading they haven't seen before.
Okay, so expand on it by maybe introducing either an equally at the same level reading material that's new, or a brand new, harder learning material for them to read for the first time to see how they do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I like that. The next question that I have on here, it says, what have you learned about your students' learning characteristics that you did not previously realize? To be perfectly honest, for this particular situation, that was my son and his best friend. So I know them really well.
Yeah.
So for that question, I think I learned that, that they take feedback well, and that I can push them harder if I needed to.
If anything, I've learned that these kids are ready to move on and move farther up, and that they are willing to get challenged, and I think they want to be challenged.
Yeah, they actually really do. All right, so number 2 says, discuss how effective your instructional design was based on your planning and teaching as evidenced by data collected on student progress and products that you've learned or that was involved. Now, to be fair, in a regular classroom, we would have had data and assessments done before on their fluency, and I included in my sample like some examples of what I would have included to test their fluency. So as far as data is collected, I just have their forms for their frequency checklist.
I'm sorry, you paused on me.
Oh, is that better?
Oh, yep, there you go.
Okay. I said for, what was I saying? For their evidence for assessments, I just have their fluency checklist forms, the 2 different pages that they had. For an actual hard copy of evidence and plus the exit ticket. which is their video, that I can then use an assessment on. Do you feel like I should have had something more? I mean, I kind of pretended that we did an assessment the week before and that we would do an assessment towards the end of the week after the lesson. But
well, yeah, because in a typical school, that's what you probably do. In a typical school, you're probably testing their fluency once a week. I think one thing that I would have loved to see on your worksheet is you asked one of the students, what do you think you want to work on, keep working on? And I really like how you made them like create their own goal. It'd be really cool, like on your checklist, if you can put that somewhere. If they're like, okay, after they've done their check mark, what do you want to work on next?
Oh, I like that. I had to checklist.
Then
future goals.
Then you have that sentence, and then they are also creating their own goal, and yes, they are having a hard time in these areas, but what they really want to work on is here. Or maybe you need to be like, so I can see you want to work on this area, but let's go back and re-listen to this and see if that's really the area you should work on.
Yeah, I like it. Thank you. See, the next question that I have is, moving forward, how will you plan differently based on your knowledge of student learning characteristics was previously known and newly discovered, and which additional differentiation strategies and multi-tiered levels of support will you consider? So this one's a little different because I don't really have, I don't have special needs that I was teaching. I don't have English language learners. I mean, they're both in a biliteracy program, so they both speak fluent Spanish. They both got their attainment awards this last year when they graduated 5th grade. But I don't feel like I had difficulty with the students that I had. And since we're in COVID, these are the students.
Well, I guess maybe take it another step. Like, if you did have students, like, what could you have done if you did have students with, how could you have changed it if you did have students with learning disabilities, or if you had ELAs, English language learners? How would you have changed your lesson?
Well, I pretended that if I had English language learners, their worksheets would have been different on Google Classroom. They would have had the same vocabulary, but it would have been translated in Spanish. I did another lesson similar where I actually did translate it for it, but I didn't have anybody available to translate to make sure that the translation was okay. So I didn't feel like I should turn in something that may be miscommunicated to students.
Right. So how would you have helped those learners who necessarily aren't at the reading level of Esperanza Rising, either in Spanish or English?
So that's kind of where the Reading Buddy books came in. I think for reading fluency, when we have easier books to read, I forgot the exact percentage, but one of the textbooks I was reading, it was something like 70% of all books that you read are the 100 basic words. So to go back and make sure those basic words are known and that there's clear understanding of vocabulary to build upon, I think will help with reading fluency. But if you don't understand what you're reading and you're stumbling on words, you're not going to be able to comprehend what's going on. And that's kind of like also in my lesson that I didn't think I should just leave it at fluency. We also talked about the characters, the setting, like what was going on in the story, because ultimately that's what you want as a goal for the reading. You want them to understand what's going on. So support-wise, I'm guessing like language transitions, more additional material, more exposure to vocabulary, and translations for the vocabulary. Do you have any other advice?
Something that I thought that you did really well that I think you could do even more is you had them like repeat after you at the very beginning. And I loved how you're like, you read the sentence and they repeated. That's a really big GLAD training, which is a specialized ELD training, where it's the more you make them use the language, the better they get at the language. So I think like when you use those vocabulary words, even if they've heard it 20 times already, having them say that vocabulary language, repeat it again, even giving like hand gestures to certain symbols, hand gestures to certain words, so they remember, oh, character is this hand gesture, is really helpful. And I saw you were kind of doing that when you were reading the book. You had a few gestures. I don't know if you were just you just did it because you were reading the book and getting into it. But those gestures really do help your English language learners and your students with learning disabilities.
Okay, so that's actually really useful to take into account, especially with this upcoming school year where I will have a lot of English language learners. And I don't know what my special needs will be yet. Okay, so additional repeat vocabulary, hand gestures. I also think maybe more feedback where I'll have them tell me what they're doing next.
Yes.
Yeah, ask them to repeat.
And even having them, maybe if depending on who you buddy them with, make sure you're not butting them with the highest reader, because the highest reader is just going to correct every word, but being strategic of buddy.
Yeah, I think budding or pairing is
practice reading together.
Oh, sorry, you were cutting out.
I'm sorry. Having them practice read together, reading together instead of separately might also bring some confidence if they're afraid of reading by themselves.
Okay. So reading together, pairing is very important for strategic reasons.
Yes.
I've always known pairing is important. I'm assuming we'll have some support with that with our administration, especially since all the students will be new to the school.
Yes.
Class.
And luckily, we will be doing a lot of assessments. Hopefully at the beginning, I know that one of our hope is to do a literacy reading assessment at the beginning of the year, so we can create strategic groupings.
The last question that I have here, it says, how will you modify or extend or incorporate new levels of presentation, expression, engagement for each learner's group as it relates to their process and products of learning?
So where would you go from here?
Yeah. I think for fluency is something you can continue to build on. I think when you get to middle school, they expect you to be fluent and they kind of just expect you to know that standard. But reading fluency is a skill that you kind of carry with you throughout your life because you use the strategies to read. And I mean, every book and text is different depending on what kind of reading you're doing. So I loved your idea about building upon, what did you say? Yes, where you said move on to harder or equal material for the first time to hear how, instead of a text that they're familiar with, how they read something new. I think that's a great expansion of the lesson to do it, because I know that for this learning standard, there is no 6-point RLF.
Nope.
So it's done.
Yeah. Are you fluent or are you not? But I think also, I like how you talked about how like fluency is important, because yes, like we've learned it and then we move on, but you never really move on, because if you're not fluent in 8th grade, it's going to make doing those 8th grade books really hard. It's going to take you a lot longer, and that's going to start the frustration. So if we can teach them the importance of fluency now, and they can understand that now and connect it to the real world, I think they will appreciate why we're making them do it.
I agree with that. The vocabulary fluency is going to be key, because you have a lot of English language learners across the board. I know for me, when I'm teaching math, I'm going to be defining and using those math terms so that they have a vocabulary base to build upon. I'm assuming all the departments would do that.
Yes.
But just because ACE is kind of on that path to make sure they really are supporting learners. So for me, vocabulary building is going to be a vital part of helping with fluency and comprehension. Do you have any other advice for me?
Overall, I really loved your lesson. I thought you did really well. I think the only thing I was like, wait, where'd that come from? The first 47 seconds of your lesson, you said you guys 5 times. And that was the only thing I was like, wait, what happened? So I think that was more of just the nervous energy of getting started. But overall, I really loved your precise phrase. I love how you checked in with them before getting started. I know this is such a weird time and virtual teaching is weird, but I loved how you were able to incorporate the boys and how they really did seem like they were having a good time, even with the books that they chose. I think they chose the book because they enjoyed the book, which is bringing the frequency into something that they love to do and making books something enjoyable as well as something you have to do sometimes, like you said. And I appreciate that you talked about that.
Thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to go over this with me. If you think of anything else, let me know. I'm going to be writing up my paper and well, basically today and tomorrow, hopefully. It's not due till Saturday at midnight, but I like to be done early.
I understand that completely. Get it done as fast as you can.
Thank you. I'm going to hit stop on the record.